And joining us live on the show is retired Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain, who is the former military secretary of the Indian Army and who is now a public speaker, strategic analyst and an author. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on the show. First of all, I'd like to begin by asking you, in your view and opinion, how does India face the existing international crisis that we are seeing unfolding before us?
Thank you, Nishita. And I can see your excellent program carrying on for the last 4 days. Yes, the issue is no doubt very worrying for India, and you have just explained this from the business and the economic angle. Let me also just outline one or two other issues as add-ons. One of them is from a strategic angle. India may be forced at this time to start taking sides. As you've seen, our foreign minister has already spoken to the Secretary of State of the United States, and he's also spoken to the foreign minister of Iran. And this is a time when Mr. Trump may be actually looking for paybacks from India for the emerging strategic relationship, that this is a time when India must display that it is on the side of the United States. This is an awkward moment for India because we import our oil also from Saudi Arabia. We used to import our oil, 11% of it from Iran. And we have a civilizational relationship with Iran, which stretches back many, many decades, many, many years. I think this is a moment when India will have to take sit back and probably look at this entire relationship. It cannot take sides. It has to play neutral on both sides. It is also a very important defining moment because you're seeing the kind of flux which is taking place in the Islamic world. The OIC, or the Organization of Islamic Conference itself, is in flux with the situation where Saudi Arabia's preeminence is being challenged, with the presence of Iran, with Turkey and Malaysia. And this is a time when Pakistan is attempting to exploit that situation. How can India leverage this for its benefit is something that we will have to look at much more seriously. So I think there's a range of issues besides just the aspect of economics. Of course, you've already outlined that $40 billion worth is at stake in terms of remittances from 8 million diaspora which exist in the Gulf. I also want to just tell you that so far as the Gulf countries are concerned, except for eastern Saudi Arabia, no other part of the Gulf has been hit by a proxy war. The UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, all these countries so far are safe and free of this. However, a response from Iran at this time, which is not likely to take place on Iraqi soil for many reasons, may just happen at one of these locations. And if that happens, then there is the serious danger of this war escalating into the regions which have not been hit by all this crisis in West Asia. So that is the time when you expect that there may be a rearward movement of a number of Indians who will not be able to stay on there. There may be a tanking of economies of those states, and that will spell another danger, another threat for India.
Right, but there is fear, although you did mention now that it is just a few of the regions in the West Asia region that are really affected by the rising tensions. But in the days and weeks to come, we can expect that tension to spread its wings around, more countries to be involved in. And you also mentioned the importance of India being neutral at this juncture, despite the expectations coming from the US. But how can India guard its policy of non-alignment in this situation when there are business interests, when there are diplomatic interests, when there are interests with the US? How does India guard its non-alignment policy?
There are two questions actually in your statement. The second I'll take subsequently. The first one on the spread of this entire crisis, the hybrid conflict, the proxy conflict in the Middle East, West Asia region. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is restricted so far. It's all a question of where the Iranians may respond. You see, the existence of proxies at the moment, having allegiance to Iran, and essentially is north of Israel in the Hezbollah, in the Lebanon area, in the area of Syria, the Levant area, northern Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and many of the Shia militias in Iraq. For various reasons, I do not expect Iran will respond on Iraqi soil because it will be against its interest, against the interest of Iraq completely. Where it will respond is a matter of choice. It could respond against Israel, primarily through the existence of a very large number of missile bases which the Hezbollah controls in the Levant area. That case, it will spread into the area of the Levant, it will spread into Lebanon and also Israel. It will not affect us so seriously in that case. It could spread into the sea routes of communication, the sea lines of communication, the Straits of Hormuz, eastern Saudi Arabia. Now that is going to be an extremely dangerous thing because what will immediately happen is that the cost of shipping is going to go up, the cost of oil is going to go up, cost of insurance is going to go up. All this is going to affect India very, very adversely. But to come back to your second question, the aspect is how do we play neutral? Our so-called non-alignment is no longer a part of our policy, but our policy is very much on multilateralism. In 1990, during the Gulf War I crisis, we tried our best to remain neutral. There were times when we gave overflight facilities to the United States Air Force and things like that, but more or less we remained neutral. In 2003, we almost sent an Indian brigade to Iraq to be a part of a peacekeeping force aligned more to the United States, but from that also we pulled back. So I think strategic sense prevails in the Indian foreign policy, and we can soft pedal both sides. Iran may be a little upset that we do not tend to take its side. We have not done enough by putting off all purchase of oil. Chabahar, we virtually put an end to Chabahar progress until the United States finally gave us permission recently. Saudi Arabia, we have 3 million people there as part of diaspora. We cannot afford to take sides against it. We get a very large part of our remittances and the major part of our energy comes from Saudi Arabia. So it's important to keep talking. I think what the foreign minister has done is the right thing. Maybe an odd visit to Tehran, a visit to Washington, and a visit even to Saudi Arabia, to UAE, some of the more important countries in this entire game, is necessary. And a lot of positive writing in the Indian media must continue, because that is what gets monitored internationally, strategically. And our channels must also continue playing this whole neutral stance about India.
Right. Thank you, sir, for joining us and sharing your expertise with us. Well, there you have it. India could be impacted on multiple fronts. We are seeing signs of it already with the Nifty as well as the Sensex tanking on Monday and losing almost 3 lakh crore rupees that were wiped off the Indian markets. However, amid growing tensions in West Asia, other world leaders are now asking both Iran and the United States to exercise restraint. China has now said that it opposes any unilateral military action against Iran, urging the United States to not abuse and use further force against Iran.
Received a letter from the permanent representative of Iran asking the Security Council to pay close attention to the current situation, and Council members are informed of that, and China, of course, as a permanent member, will work together with other members and to do whatever we can to safeguard international law, to safeguard justice, and to avoid the further deterioration of the tension in the region. That's not in the interest of any of us.
Meanwhile, concerns about Iran breaching the nuclear deal continues to grow. France has now said that European powers will now decide whether they will launch a dispute resolution process over Iran's latest violations. Launching a dispute resolution process could be detrimental as it would eventually lead to renewed UN sanctions on Tehran.
La situation est même très grave. Il y a un enchaînement de l'escalade qui devient extrêmement préoccupant et qui, si elle se poursuit, peut amener à une situation de conflit. Oui, c'est vrai. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle il faut mobiliser tous nos efforts pour enrayer ce processus extrêmement perturbant et qui peut nous entraîner dans des affres difficilement contrôlables après.
Well, echoing the sentiments of other leaders, British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab has now urged all those involved to find a diplomatic solution to the tensions.
Well, General Soleimani was a regional threat. He had a track record. That was his job description. I don't think we will, as the Prime Minister said, lament his passing. But at the same time, looking forward now, the key message that we've got to all of our European American partners, but critically also to the Iranians, to the Iraqis, and all of those affected in the region is the importance to diffuse the tensions, to de-escalate. And I had a conversation with Foreign Minister Zarif this afternoon where we conveyed that message as well, and the importance of finding a diplomatic way through.
Well, amid tensions, the US has now denied a visa to Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif that would have allowed him to attend a United Nations Security Council meeting in New York. The United States also accused Russia and China of blocking the UN Security Council statement on the attack on United States embassy in Baghdad. Such statements made by the 15-member Security Council have to be agreed on by consensus. US has said that while 27 countries condemned the attack, there was absolute silence from the United Nations' 2 permanent members, China and Russia. Meanwhile, United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo continues with his diplomatic overdrive. Pompeo met with Saudi Deputy Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman in a state meeting to address steps for de-escalation.